All right, before we start today's episode, I want to give a big shout out to the Patreon subscribers. And if you don't know what Patreon is, it's a way for you to support the show. All you gotta do is go over to patreon.com/bigtruth, and then you'll see all the different levels of patronage that there is. And they all have their own exclusive benefits and whatnot. So check it out. If you can do me a big favor, like I said, this is free. And if you can do me a favor and go wherever you're listening, if you can make sure you're subscribed to the show, give it the stars, give it a like, give it a review. Like, I know you can't do some of the different outlets are different, but wherever you listen, try and give it a review or a like or stars or whatever it is. And especially if you're on Apple, give it a 5-star review and write some words about it. And that boosts us up in the algorithm and helps a lot. And keeps it going and growing, right? And make sure you share it with people. Spread the word, right? Now, if you find yourself in a situation where you need some artwork, right? You punched a hole in the wall, you need to cover it up, or you just got ugly walls and you don't want to paint, or, your roommate left and took some artwork away, now you get these holes to fill, or you opened up a tattoo shop and you need flash, whatever it is, for your house, your apartment, your studio, your shop, your garage, your cell, your cubicle, whatever it is, you need some artwork. Make things more interesting while you're looking around, right? You need to check out Tattoo Flash Collective over at tattooflashcollective.com and on Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff as at Tattoo Flash Collective. They, obviously they sell tattoo flash, but they sell all kinds of artwork, different prints, different sizes. They have books, anything you need art related. They work directly with the artists. And they support real artists all around the world. And it's not it's not some whatever you call those, like the company that just generates artwork out of nowhere. It's not AI. It's all hand-drawn stuff. They have hand-drawn, hand-painted stuff. Then they have their the iPad stuff separate. But there's all kinds of stuff over there. So check it out, tattooflashcollective.com. If you use the promo code BigTruth at checkout, you get 10% off your order. If you are a Patreon subscriber, you get even more off your order. I have a motorcycle shop that you may know about or you may not know, especially if you're a new listener. You check us out over at choppahead.com, CHOPPAHEAD. But more than a website is a full brick and mortar, fully functional, operational motorcycle shop. We got a front building with the parts counter, showroom, and everything, and then the shop in the back, the fabrication and service and repair bays. We do anything you need, whether you need an oil change or a full custom motorcycle built, anything in between, we do it all. Full service, so that means everything. So check us out, 13 County Road, East Freetown, Massachusetts. But if you're far away, you can always log in and pick up a hoodie or a t-shirt or something, support that way, choppahead.com. If you want to get more information on the podcast, just go to bigtruthpodcast.com. And if you're not aware, we do have a merch store up, and there's all kinds of wild merchandise there. It's fulfilled by a merch company, so they have all kinds of wacky stuff. Your normal stuff, hoodies and crew necks and t-shirts and tank tops and stuff, but they also have like iPhone cases and travel mugs and stuff like that. So check it out. Go to bigtruthpodcast.com. If you want to go to the merch store, just hit store and then follow the link from there and it'll bring you over there. All right. And that's it for today. Today's I got my man Harley back on, and you may know him from Tradition Cycles. He's a dude that I've known for decades, mainstay in the motorcycle and chopper scene. He's an old punk rock guy, an old skateboarder guy, mainstay in all those scenes. But we get a little different today. We delve a little bit into the world of the weird. So the backstory is, like, the last time he was on, we talked mostly about motorcycle stuff, a little bit of punk rock stuff, whatever. And afterwards, we were talking and we got into some weird stuff. And so we were like, down the road, we got to do a podcast where we just talk about all his weird experiences. So stay tuned for a little delve into the paranormal right now.
We have a liftoff.
All right. Once again, we have liftoff. I'm only laughing because this is our second attempt. We had some technical glitches before, but I want to formally welcome once again my man Harley on the podcast for his second appearance. Harley's a veteran of the punk rock, hardcore, motorcycle, chopper, and all the things that matter. He's a veteran of those scenes, and he was on the show before. We talked about motorcycle stuff, but this time we're going to get into a little bit of weird stuff. Yeah, man. But it was good catching up last time. Like I was saying before when we started this the first time, we got a lot of good reviews and a lot of good response off that episode. People were stoked on it. And like I said, we hadn't talked in a while. So like we were talking a lot before and after the episode. And then like, when everything was said and done, you were like, dude, I got some weird shit to talk about. So here we are.
I have a lot of weird shit. Believe it or not, this is like the first. Well, there's very few people that I talk about it with.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like my in small circles I'll say some shit occasionally.
Yeah.
But this is probably like the first time I guess that the world's gonna hear a bunch of weird, odd shit that's happened over my years. So
yeah. The first time people hear the campfire stories.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm a firm believer that there's other stuff besides just here.
Yeah.
What we perceive. And I guess I've been lucky enough to have weird shit happen to me over the years.
Yeah. So, why don't we start from the beginning? Like, well, first of all, I guess maybe, and maybe this is, I don't know if this is too personal, but you said, you're a firm believer that there's more going on than the surface level stuff here. Like what kind of is your, belief system? Like, what do you think is out there? Or what do you think's going on?
I mean, first and foremost, like right off the rip, to say that we're the only like intelligent beings in the universe is ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, that alone is just, it's pretty selfish of human beings to think that we're the only thing in the universe.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like also a firm believer that, we're, that the level that we're at, we're all gods. And that might be a weird thing for people to hear, but, when you consider the feats that we did and how many millions of years that, we've been on Earth, it's amazing to think that. But, I'm a firm believer of like frequencies and stuff like that. So, I think everything, what we perceive is probably at a certain frequency that everybody perceives something at, the human beings perceive something at. And then, you could essentially, like a radio, tune into a different station occasionally.
Sure.
And I mean, that's kind of the thing that I believe, where it's like this weird thing where, everything just kind of aligns in like at a point in time, and you get to see in another frequency, So that's kind of the thing that I believe. I don't necessarily. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Like dimensions and all that stuff, where like people talk about like everything's happening in a different dimension at the same time that it's happening here. But to me, it's a little bit easier kind of just to be like, oh, it's a different frequency. We just tune into it, or we have an enlightened moment where you you end up being somewhere in something that happens at a different frequency.
Sure. Yeah. And there's a lot out there where people are getting into that and researching different facets of frequency stuff. Just to circle back to one thing you mentioned earlier, when you said we're all gods, do you mean we're all like kind of, do you believe we're all individual gods, or do you think that we're all part of the same big kind of for lack of a better word, supreme thing?
I mean, I think we have the power to be part of a supreme thing.
Yeah.
I think, going back 10,000 years or like different civilizations, I think that's kind of how the civilizations worked. I think nowadays, like everybody's so not in tune with anything. A lot of people not in tune with themselves and are just kind of taking, everything face value. So, I don't, essentially, I'm not saying that like we're a god, like, people think of like a religious god, but I'm saying like
capital G God. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm saying like, to consider like what we do and like how your brain functions and all, like your heart and your electrical system and all this stuff. It's kind of like one of those things where it's like, mammals are kind of like a supreme being in a way, even just to think like on such a small level, to think that like you can talk to yourself in your head and nobody else can hear you, but you're talking to yourself in your head.
Yeah.
Where just thinking about that is kind of a weird thing where you're like, well, yeah, like I understand what I'm thinking in my head, but nobody else is hearing what I'm saying in my head.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if that makes any sense, then that's kind of like what, where I'm at with that.
Yeah. Do you have, cause I know, did you ever see that there's people, when they do research, like there's only a certain number or a certain percentage of the population that has an actual voice in their head? Do you just kind of process thoughts as a thing, or do you hear like an actual?
I hear like actual voice in my head. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. This is the weird shit, right? Because this is like the shit that you start talking about at 4 a.m. when but like it's weird to be doing it at like 7 p.m.
Yeah.
Because this is the stuff like where like I'm gonna curse everybody listening to this now, like with this I don't know, for lack of a better word, exercise, right? Like you just said, like you hear stuff in your head, like you thinking about stuff and you're like, how am I doing this? Or like then it gets even weirder. It's like, how am I moving my hand right now? I'm like showing you my hand and I'm doing this, but I have no idea how I'm doing this, and I'm doing it as I'm fucking talking to you right here. Like fucking it's crazy. Like that stuff will keep me up all night. Like and then I'll have to like do something to shut off, because then it's like it just goes on and on and on.
Right. That's like if you've ever gotten like ridiculously high before, where you start thinking like, oh dude, like how am I doing this? Or you can't function and move your hand, where you're like, why is my hand not moving, but my brain's telling my hand to move, but I'm not functioning like I should be. There's like a disconnect between the two, and it's like, man, this is really weird. So yeah, to some degree, I feel like I mean, a lot of the stuff that we do on a regular basis, we just don't even think about. It's like, It's like to think that your heart beats all the time, dude, for how 78, not 80 years of your life or 90 years of your life, and you have no control over it. It's just doing it by, it's like just functioning.
Yeah.
Which is weird. Like, it's weird. I mean, it's not like ghosts and shit like that, but it's still weird stuff.
Yeah, the shit going on inside you is weird stuff. Like the design, the grand design of like the human form, or like you said, any like mammal or whatever form, like everything that's going on, all the systems that are in place that are working together at one thing. And it's miraculous that more stuff doesn't go wrong, right? Like, But yeah, so when you're talking about frequency, and I know this is at a different level, there's like a lot of stuff been coming out. Have you, I don't know if you're up on or not, but it's just an interesting side, because I know you're an old music guy too, about the frequency of music and like how it's recorded and at what frequency can dictate stuff that's going on with music. And they're saying that a lot of stuff now is like recorded at a real like low frequency. It kind of brings people down. Like it's not like, for lack of a better word, uplifting like music can be.
I think they said, like, I could be wrong, dude. So, I mean, I've done some research on it. As a matter of fact, like I was just hanging out with Sean Martin, like the other day, who used to play in Hatebreed. He plays in Twitching Tongues now. We were talking about hertz, and I was like, dude, like I was like reading all this stuff about frequencies, And like, I think music is like at 400 and something hertz, I think. I don't remember I don't remember exactly. And then they were saying like people could relate to it because that's the frequency that we're supposed to hear at. But like cell phones, televisions, like digital stuff is like at 130 hertz or something, which is really low. Yeah. And what it does is it causes, they say that it causes chaos with people. So I was saying to Sean, I was like, dude, can you imagine if you could figure out all these weird frequencies and then like record something in the studio, like some death metal shit that like really fucking like makes people super depressed or like, you know, and we were talking about it, and it's pretty interesting to think, you know, because everything does, you know, there is frequencies, especially like with all, you know, you see like science where people like start like, you know, like recording frequencies from like plants and stuff like that. And, you know, everything does have a frequency. So I mean, I can see how something like that would cause turmoil in somebody, you know, and I have a list of, on my phone, actually, like I screen grabbed a list of like all the frequencies and what they're supposed to do. And they say different frequencies have healing powers as well.
Yeah. Like the one the monks chant at and stuff like that, the Tibetan monks.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Two things with this that are just kind of dumb, like that'll be funny as a side. You ever hear of the brown tone? Speaking of frequencies.
No, I have not.
There's supposed to be a frequency that basically makes you shit your pants, right? So that was like when you were talking about like trying to make some death metal that's like all weird and stuff. It was a running joke with me and my boy Ryan that passed away a couple years ago. We always wanted to do a band and find that tone, that frequency, the brown tone, and just put that in a song. Just like when anyone listens to it, they just shit their pants, like just like a mess.
That would be amazing. You know, there's the thing too is it's like, have you ever done, you know, like to some degree, I'm not like a hippie, but I'm like into like alternative stuff. I'll try like anything, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I mean, this is super personal, but I, you know, when I lost my parents, I was having a lot of trouble with a lot of stuff, and I was going to therapy. And my therapist said, you know, like therapy can only take you so far because there's like these deep rooted things that sometimes your psyche can't get to. Yeah. You know, and even if you're talking and doing all this stuff, it's so deep inside your brain that you can't kind of reach it. So she, you know, so my wife Sarah was like, let's go to sound healing, you know? And I was like, yeah, whatever, you know, like I'll try sound healing. So we went to sound healing. And if any of your viewers don't know sound healing, it's basically like crystal bowls in different, you know, in different things where they use frequencies and tones, you know, and people get different stuff out of it, you know, whether it's relaxation. I've taken friends and I'm like, listen, dude, if you just get an hour of like sleep out of it, dude, that's all, like you're good. Yeah. You know, you don't have to have like an epiphany from it. It's just relaxing, and it, you know,
sometimes just removing yourself from the day-to-day grind and taking an hour to do that, even if it's like you said, like even if it's not something that you're sold on, just removing yourself from regular life for an hour and relaxing and like having nothing else go on will be beneficial for you.
Exactly. So it's like, you know, I think a lot of people with a lot of stuff are like, dude, that's bullshit, whatever. And it's like, just kind of take it for face value if you're going to do it. Yeah. You know? So, so we went, and I went to this dude who was super amazing. We went in, and, you know, it was like an hour of like him, like on these crystal bowls and just like, you know, kind of bringing you in kind of out of consciousness a little bit, dude. And when I got done with it, I was literally bawling, dude. I was crying so hard that I was laying down, obviously, on the floor, dude. I had tears in my ears, like just massive release. And it was like, it was unintentional. I couldn't explain it. It wasn't anything that was really like set in stone. I was like, I'm going to go in here and cry. I went in with the intention that nothing was going to happen. I was like, yeah, this is probably bullshit, but I'll relax for an hour. And it literally, whatever frequency or vibration that tone was at, it literally just kind of like released all this trauma and all this, pent up sadness that I had in me, and it was amazing, and I couldn't explain it. So it's just kind of this weird thing. So did you find yourself in like a meditative state when you were there? Yeah, kind of. Like, and that's the weird thing about like with the vibrations. It's like you literally can feel the vibration like in your like from these tones at your feet, and kind of like move up your body into your head. It's really weird, and even people that I've taken that didn't get that much, what I got out of it, they still said the same thing. They were like, wow, man, like you could really feel the vibration of these tones, whereas with, I think with music, sometimes you can get that, that if you see a band live, or see somebody performing live, but it's very rare that you can kind of be in a state of mind where you can actually like, assess what's going on and be like, whoa, dude, this is really weird.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. That seems like one of those things, where there's going to be people, I don't know how to explain this, like anything kind of like that alternative or like new age type therapy, there's going to be real people, and I feel like there's a lot of room for abuse in that kind of realm. Like there's going to be some Yanni motherfucker like trying to like, you know what I'm saying? Like, but that's cool that you found something like a legit spot and gut stuff. And did you have to ever go back, or did it like that
I went back a bunch. I just went back because I enjoyed doing it. Not every time was like that. The dude that did it was this dude Kelvin, and he was like old school kind of like just kind of like into like hip hop and stuff like that. And then he ended up going to jail, and kind of was just like, dude, I had two options. He kind of found a lot of alternative medicine, I guess, in there, and started doing some stuff to help himself. Yeah. And started doing the sound therapy, so it's kind of this thing where I was like, well, this dude is kind of legit, because he's like kind of cut from the same cloth. He's not some like, no offense, but he's not some like rich chick that's like, her, like, kind of like living off dad's money, or a trust fund kid, where they're just like, I have nothing better to do. I'm just going to get into new age, new age medicine. He was just I was like, yo, dude, I was like, this dude's kind of like a legit dude.
Yeah. That's cool.
And I think, like you said, I think there's a lot of room for people, and hey, whatever you get out of I'm definitely not like doubting anybody or anything. Whatever you get out of it, you get out of it, whether it's like these people are kooks or not. It's like what you take from it is what you take from it, know.
And it's also your mindset going in, like, because you're going to get out of it what you want or need if you apply that kind of mindset to whatever it is you're going into, like,
Yeah, I mean, I'll try most anything, like for the most part. Like, I'm down to try, whatever. If I get something out of it, cool. If I don't, then it's an experience, so it is what it is. But I think there's a lot to be said. I think a lot of people just kind of forget about their bodies and what you're capable of doing and what you're capable of achieving in your mind. There's like this disconnect where people just don't realize. It's like, it's like often you hear people saying like, oh, like I had this health issue and I didn't even know I had it. And you're like, dude, how did you not know that you had that?
Yeah.
Like you can't tell that your body is not, there's something messed up with it. you know, and I just think it's like not being in tune with your mind and kind of your body being in tune with the same thing. Which sounds like hippie shit, dude. I know, but you know.
No, but you know, it is like, no, it's real, you know, like, because there's times like if I'm distracted or I'm stressed or I'm like running full tilt, like, and like, you know, I go to the gym every day and stuff, like, well, 5 days a week, every day during the week,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and it's like if I'm not in tune, like, it's not the same, like, you know, if you're not mindful of everything, it's easy to be numb to stuff, especially when
Yeah.
you're not taking time to, you know, I don't know, for lack of a better word, to reconnect or connect all that stuff, right? Like
Yeah,
you go into that for an hour, you know, and you're experiencing frequencies and like you're feeling it and it's going through you and stuff. Is you're removing yourself from the day-to-day rat race. When people caught up in the rat race, like they can be less in tune with things, like, you know, physically, mentally, psychologically, emotionally, whatever.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
And I really didn't, you know, I come from like, you know, I mean, I'm sure people listen to the last podcast, like, you know, I grew up skateboarding and BMX and snowboarding and motocross and all that shit, where it's just like, you know, you're focused on what you're doing and you get hurt and you get up and you just like, you either, you know, you either heal from it, but you're not really like, I mean, your brain is programmed to just like, just to do things. You're programmed not to feel pain. You know, like you program yourself to not feel pain. You program yourself to like get up regardless of what happens and try it again and try it again and try it again until you kill yourself. And it's like, it wasn't really until like, you know, my wife kind of was like, you know, taught me, and I'm still not good at it. I still go back to the same shit where I'm just like grinding it out, you know, but I feel like at least knowing some stuff now, you know, it's like, you know, meditation, I can't meditate. Like, I can't, like, I'm not really good at it. I try, but I'm not really good at it. You know, but it's been around for thousands of years. So how can you, you know, like, how can you discredit something that's been around that long? And the gurus and the, you know, and the monks and all these people that have done it, like, it's got to do something, because they wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't.
Yeah, yeah. And then some of that stuff, you ever see stuff that like Tibetan monks and stuff do, like with like, or, you know, different monks from around the world do when they're in meditative states, like where they'll stay outside on the top of the mountain in snow for like 4 days, and you see all the snow's melted around them and they're just like sitting still in it. Like the stuff that you can do if you apply yourself, and like you said, if you got all systems connected, is can be phenomenal. But you know, in our world, the modern world, you know, like we're doing a lot of low vibration stuff that's just dulling a lot of it. Like the food you eat, like not you, I'm saying in general, like you know, food that has all additives and GMOs and you know, water with fluoride and blah blah blah. It sounds like all hippy dippy stuff, but it's all real. And all you got to do is basics. Spend 10 minutes searching that if you think we're talking about dumb shit, like, and it's all there for you to see, right? Yeah, it's like you said, TV. You know, like it's set at that wavelength of that. You know, I find if you go out and you veg out and you're just watching TV for like 3 hours, like you've done nothing, and you can feel that you're like you've just shut off. You feel numb. You don't even feel like you're just like whatever. You know what I mean? Like
I think a lot of, you know, for us, like especially our age group, it was like, dude, what, like, you know, we're like latchkey kids, man. It's like, what did you do? It's like you either did two things. You either went home, played video games, watched television, or you were outside you know, like some of us were outside skateboarding and BMX and shit like that, or causing trouble, lighting shit on fire. You know, but I mean, so I think it's just programmed, and you know, I think of the first step for a lot of people is if you cut that stuff out, you'll automatically feel more motivated, and all this other stuff. And the weird thing is I mean, I don't want to get off track, but I feel like, you know, going back to like if we kind of segue into like the paranormal thing, for me, it like a lot of stuff started when I was really young.
Yeah.
And I feel like, and you'll see where I'm going with this. I feel like when you're young, like 4, 5, 6, when you just start like being able to kind of like not think on your own, but like have thoughts and do stuff like that.
When your brain's really getting booted up, right? Yeah.
Yeah. You have you don't have any. There's no guidelines that are already set for you.
Yeah, there's no years of experience that you just rely on that rather than what's ahead of you or what's in front of you.
So I think like you end up being in tune more with a lot of stuff. So like when they say like, oh, like kids will see things that grown up people don't see, or which was kind of like not necessarily me when I was young, but like there was weird shit that happened to me when I was a kid that was unexplained. Still to this day, I can't explain it. I can't say that it that I believe in it or I don't believe in it, but it happened. And I think like, you're not programmed to not, we're so, as young adults, we start getting into, going into school, and then you start getting like structure, and that structure doesn't allow you kind of to like think or allow stuff to happen, or you to be able to pick up these different frequencies necessarily, because you're kind of being like guided in some way where it's like this thoughtless process of just I guess structure, where it's like, no, that's not real.
Yeah.
When you're a kid, anything's real, dude. You're like, oh, like you could pick up a stick and make it a gun.
Yeah.
Or you can do anything that you want to do, or you could think however you want to do. So I think that allows you to be able to process a lot of things and maybe experience stuff that you're later in life you can't, because you're so bombarded with this outside frequency and this all this stuff happening in the world that just kind of like doesn't allow you to focus on or to allow you to let this stuff kind of come in.
No, absolutely, yeah. And there's a lot of people that talk about that, and researchers that say that and even in regular life, anecdotally, right? Like you always see like kids and dogs, man, are always looking at something that isn't there, right? Because dogs do the same shit, right? Like,
Dogs.
My dog would freak me the fuck out. It'll be 2 a.m. I'll be sitting there with her, and all of a sudden she's looking at something. I'm like,
my dog's the same way.
I'm like, what do we gotta go? What are we gonna do?
I like Buddhists, the Buddhist religion. I've briefly studied certain different religions a little bit. The Buddhist religion, they say that like cats and dogs are the in reincarnation, they're the step before becoming human. The next reincarnation from a dog or a cat is a human being. But they're also don't have the structure that we have. So, the ability, it allows them to kind of tune into different stuff that we don't necessarily, see. Yeah. So, and that's why I think like for me, it started, it started out really young. I mean, it was like, man, maybe like when I was like 5, I would say 5 or 6, weird shit started happening.
Well, let's go through that. And has it happened throughout life, or was it just more from when you were a kid?
It has. It's happened. Multiple different things. Different things. Like when I was a kid, the first thing really that I noticed was, and again, like I haven't talked about this shit, so it's one of those things where it's just like it sounds so ridiculous when it comes out of my mouth, to me. But honestly, so when I was a kid, and my parents would put me to bed, usually at about, I would say it was probably about 10:30 at night, my bed would start shaking. And the first time it happened, I thought I honestly thought it was my heartbeat that was shaking the bed.
Was it in the same
And
rhythm? Was it?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was like just it would. I mean, if I get it was like it would shake like this.
Okay, so it wasn't
It
like
would
the
just
ones
shake.
people paid 50 cents for like the buzz, like, you
No,
know,
it wasn't like a
wasn't
vibrating thing. It was like
hotel
this. It was like this kind of shaking,
shimmy.
and it
Yeah,
wasn't like a violent shake. It would just like shake really bad.
yeah,
Um,
like side to
and
side.
it would progressively get worse. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So I thought like when it started, like I was kind of like, is it me? Like, am I shaking my foot? It almost felt, it felt like somebody was shaking the bed.
Mm.
And I remember telling my parents like, hey, like I went to sleep and my bed was shaking, and they were like, oh, you were dreaming.
Yeah, yeah. They didn't hear it then. It didn't make, like, it wasn't like loud or anything.
I mean, for me, it was loud. My bedroom was kind of in the back of the house, like in the television is kind of like in front of it was kind of in the front room of our house.
Okay.
So there was like a small hallway that went into the bedroom, and they would my door would be closed. So even you probably wouldn't be able to hear, because I remember being like, I would like maybe call for my parents and they wouldn't hear me right away.
Yeah.
So I feel like even if it did make sound, and this went on for a good amount of, I would say probably like it wasn't like every night, but it would be like a good amount of the week,
Yeah.
nights, and then it would happen like, man, I would say it probably happened for a whole year.
How long would it go on for?
Dude, it would go on until I sat up. And then, and sometimes if I sat up and then laid back down, it would start doing it again. And it's weird because I always think like, you watch like Poltergeist, like, and there's like weird shit that's happening to kids. And I guess it wasn't maybe until I saw that movie that I was just kind of like, whoa, this is kind of, is a weird thing that's happening.
Did you get a sense that it was something like messing with you, or did you feel like that it was more, it was like you, like something vibrating out of you?
No. It was definitely an outside influence because I couldn't stop it. I would look at myself to make sure that it was not me.
Yeah.
And I would also like get in this weird, like I would get so scared that I would be like I wouldn't say petrified, but like I would think to myself, like, put your hands next to your legs, and kind of lay like as one unit, and maybe it'll stop. And like, so I was old enough to kind of be able to think like, hey, like maybe I could stop this from happening. But it was definitely like an outside, it seemed like an outside influence that was either maybe trying to communicate with me, or maybe trying to like, like, I mean, that's kind of the only thing that I could think, really. It wasn't like it was I don't feel like it was like a ghost, like, necessarily like people say like entities maybe, but it was definitely something I was, or maybe I was just in tune with something that, was happening all the time, and I just kind of like tuned into that. But it was physical. It was physical enough where if I sat up, and at first I thought it was just like either me dreaming or I was just kind of making this shit up. But it happened way too often for it to it to happen. And I remember like being like giving my parents a hard time and being like, I don't want to sleep on my bed. And they'd be like, why? I'd be like, because my bed shakes at night. I can't stop it from shaking. And they'd just be like, you're ridiculous. Like,
So so this would be like, you said it would go on start around 10:30. What time did you go to bed? So it'd be like, would you already be asleep?
I would already be asleep, and then I would wake up. I would probably, I mean, my parents, the thing, so my dad worked two jobs. So my dad was like he was always a body and paint guy and a fabricator, but like his like real job, I guess, was like, he was a spring maker. He's a coiler. So he made springs. So he would come home at 5 o'clock in the after work, and he would come home and eat, and then he would go work at my cousin's body shop. And so he would come home late at night, and I remember like I would go to bed, and then he would wake me up, and then we would watch like Johnny Carson or some shit, dude. And then he would put me back to sleep. So it was like it would be kind of in between those times where I would get back up. And a lot of times, like I remember getting up and walking out of my room and just sitting on the couch, with him and watching TV, because I was like kind of petrified to like, well, one, I couldn't really sleep. And then two, I was like petrified of it.
Sure. Yeah.
Like when you're a 6-year-old kid and your bed shakes, you're just like, man, this is fucked up,
Yeah. Multiple times a week, right? Like on a weekly basis. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, like I thought, I mean, I thought essentially I originally thought it was me, but it happened too often for it not to be, and you start thinking logically, I think, when you're older, to be like, why would I like make some shit, like why, being 6 years old, why would I make up this story that my bed shook?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it wasn't like I was like abused or somewhere like that, where it's like there's this outlet where a kid needs to like, have this outlet, or, I was just using abused as kind of a thing, because, kids when they're abused at young ages, like end up doing weird shit,
Yeah.
or like crying out or acting out, in different ways, just to kind of get attention or whatever, the help that they need. So it wasn't like that. And it's just kind of like, why in the world would I ever make, why would I make this shit up?
Yeah. Yeah, and especially it was just like my bed shakes. It wasn't like you're saying there's a monster in the closet or something's tormented me. It was like, the motherfucker shaking my bed. Like,
yeah. And like, we lived in a fairly new house. It wasn't like I lived in a super old house. Like my parents' house was like built during the war. Like there was only one other family that lived there. So it wasn't like, there was like this, like, backstory of like, oh dude, there was a child that, died in this house or something like that, or anything like that. It was just kind of like, and again, I think, why in the world would I make some shit up like that? I wasn't like, I wasn't a kid that like lied or needed attention or anything like that. And I never really told anybody except my parents.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, now I'm telling like all
the
your
world's
viewers.
But hey, what's weird is that a lot of paranormal researchers now are saying, to the point where you're saying where the house was fairly new, is that a lot of times they think things are attached to the land, not to the actual physical structure. So it could be both, but sometimes they feel things are like attached to the land itself.
Yeah, that would make perfect sense. Yeah, that'd make perfect sense. I mean, the house that I live in now, there was Native Americans that lived here like 1,200 years ago. Like Peabody Museum had did like a excavation in like 1941. As a matter of fact, there's this big rock that has the top of it broken off from a glacier, and literally they lived in that with a structure over the top of it, and it's like maybe 200 yards from my house.
Yeah.
Not getting off subject. So I could see how, like, maybe like spiritual things are attached to, like, I don't have any like weird stuff that happens here, knock on wood, yet, but yeah, I could see how that would be if you're, if there's ancestors for hundreds or thousands of years that have been on that. It doesn't necessarily mean, and that's kind of like where that frequency thing comes in, where it's like, yeah, they're probably just there as in a different frequency all the time. Yeah.
It's all stuff that's very interesting to ponder, and I think some of the fun of it, or the things that make it fun, is that we don't know, right? And it could be all these things that looking into it is and trying to think of what it could be sometimes is more fun, than knowing the actual answer. I think
it's like
the mystery of it, the mysteries.
Around the same time of that was happening, or around the same time. I would probably say I would say maybe I was maybe around 8 years old or so. I used to be able to do this weird thing and take like watches and make watches run that didn't run. So my great grandfather worked on the railroad back in the day, and he had this watch, like this pocket watch that my parents had in like a curio cabinet for like ever, and it was like on this little pedestal. And one day I took it out of, it hadn't run in years, like I'm talking like, he got it when he retired, so that was like my great grandfather. So that was probably, when I was a kid, it was probably already 50 years old, maybe 60 years old. And dude, I used to take it and hold it in my hand, like inside my hands like this.
Yeah. Dude,
and I would be able to make the watch run for like 15 minutes. And it completely freaked my parents out. Like completely. I remember doing it and being, and this sounds ridiculous again, dude, but I remember like holding it and just like chanting to myself, like work, make this watch work. And I literally would be able to take pocket watches or whatever. I don't know if it was because like the heat of my hands or whatever the case may be, but like it was this weird thing that my parents would always be like they never told anybody, but they would always be like, oh, like that's this weird thing that you could do, and nobody should know that you could actually do this thing.
Yeah. So it's the vibrations, man. The vibrations.
I mean, maybe, but that was around, around the same time. And then, I think as I got older, was like I think it kind of changed directions as far as like the stuff that I was like susceptible to, I guess, or like, like kind of the stuff that I was experiencing.
Yeah. I don't want, before we move on, I got a couple questions about the watch stuff. So with your great grandfather's watch, you could get it to work for like 15 minutes, like you said.
Yeah.
Then it would gradually go back to.
Yeah, it would stop working.
Did you ever try it with other watches?
Yeah. I could do it with pocket watches. I could do it any watch. Like if somebody had a watch that didn't run, you could hand me a watch, dude, and I would be able to like make it run for a short period of time. It was the weirdest thing.
Yeah. Did you like, as a kid when you were doing that, was it something you felt, or was it just like you just put it in your hand and you willed it? I mean, it's kind of weird because I think I've always kind of felt like this, like it almost felt like kind of like energy to some degree. Yeah.
Like where you kind of harness like a energy, and still to this day, I can't do it with watches anymore, but I still to this day, like I almost kind of feel, the same, where it's like sometimes I could feel this, this energy. I don't want to fast forward now, but I think like you were saying,
bro, honestly, it's like literally the best skill you could have as a dude that's into vintage choppers. Like it's like you could just be like, bro, fucking work.
I just wish I could hold on to like a cylinder and then kickstart a bike and just be like, oh, it works.
Hold on to this carburetor and let it just do whatever.
but it was unexplainable, and like I said, it freaked my parents out so bad. They were like, do not tell anybody that you could do this. And like when we grew up, I mean,
did you use that as ammo to be like, yeah, and you didn't believe me on the bed shake? Like, look at what I'm doing with this.
I don't know if I don't know if I did or not, but I do remember it being 100% being real. So like, people discredit it and say whatever, but I know, and again,
it would be the weirdest thing to make up, right? Like if you're gonna make up,
like I'm a superhero. I can make watches work. Like it doesn't make any, it doesn't make any sense. It's like just some stupid thing. And really, I got it from I watched I think it was a magician on television do it, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And that's why, and that's how it kind of became a thing, because I watched it on television, and then I remember asking my parents if I could take that watch out and see if I could do it with that watch. And I knew that watch hadn't run in forever, and you could wind the shit out of it, and it didn't work.
Okay.
And again, when I did it, it literally like my parents were like, put the watch back, like just leave it alone, don't touch the watch. But then I did it, and I couldn't do it with digital watches. I can only do it with mechanical watches,
yeah.
you know. I never really could explain it. I always thought it was just like, I was like, oh, it's got to be like the warmth of my hands being together or something, you know. But I still feel like you were saying with the monks, you know, I think like it's like mind over matter, where you could literally take and make yourself warm if you meditate on it, or tell yourself, you know, like you can get warm.
Yeah.
You know, because you see these dudes that like do like these like ice baths and shit. And there's one dude from like, I don't remember what that dude's name is, but I wish I knew, but he was, they did a bunch of studies on him, and he was able to like sit in ice cold water and bring his body temperature up, like slow his heart rate down, bring his body temperature up. And oddly enough, and he taught himself how to do it. And oddly enough, researchers were stoked because he had a twin brother that couldn't do it.
Yeah,
so they, you know, so they did studies on the both of them, and were like, this dude, obviously it's not genetic that he could do it, because his brother can't, and he's a twin, you know. So I think like a lot of things we discredit, but when you're a kid, you don't know any better that you can't do some shit.
Yeah. And because I was going to ask you too, like what made you try and fix a watch, right? Or make a watch work, but like, it makes sense. You saw it on TV and you're like, I can do that. Like, try it. Or you just open to it. Yeah.
And that was essentially it. You know, I remember watching the show, and this dude starting a watch. So, I mean, whether it was real or not, I didn't know whether it was real. And I think, you know, like being a kid, you don't have boundaries. You don't know what is real and what's not. You don't know what you're capable of and what you're not capable of.
Yeah.
You know, and even I think like older, you know, you hear all these stories about people doing these like superhuman things, depending on what.
Yeah.
You know, what,
like the kid that gets stuck under a car or something, and the mother lifts the car up and all that stuff.
Yeah. Like that shit, where it's like mind over matter. You at that moment in time, you're not thinking like, shit, you know, like what am I gonna do? You either do something or you don't.
Yeah, just in action. Yeah. And then I think Stan Lee had a TV show too about people that could do things.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I can't remember what it was. And it made sense because Stan Lee was like, it was a play on superheroes, but people that had like weird abilities like that, you know, that they could do things that were beyond the normal.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, what do they say? They say, you know, whatever percentage you use of your brain, dude, you know, like every organ that we have in our body is used to the fullest. I mean, you know, you don't use 10% of your heart. You know, your heart is like, you know, so we have these brains that we use only a small percentage of our brains. What are we capable of doing that, you know, we don't know. And you know, again, like I said, when you're a kid, there's a fine line between reality and what you believe.
Sure. And there's also, and when you get on the brain stuff too, there's also just like different people can access or fire different parts of the brain more easily than others, and that's where a lot of weird stuff comes from too. Like, because
Right.
you know, some people have blockages or like can't fight. Like, you know, even on like weird stuff, like with like serial killers or something, they say something's like more active in one area than another and can cause all that stuff.
Yeah, like
Brain chemistry
like
is still a huge field of like where they don't know anything. Like, they only know a drop in the bucket of to really what's out there, to figuring out like how everything really works.
Yeah, and how do you know? It's like there's parts of our brain that we don't act. You know, we don't even act. You know, you don't have access to, or you don't use. You know, and it's even like when they say, oh, you know, like left-handed people are like more creative, or you know, like or you know, because they think differently, or
right-brained, left-handed.
What's that?
They say, if you're left-handed, you're right-brained. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, so I think, you know, a lot of things are not explained just because, you know, maybe we don't have access to the information, you know, how to utilize it. It might be some, you know, you know, like when you hear monks or like, you know, these various like religious people where they're like saying like, oh, you know, meditation unlocks all this different stuff that's, you know, in your brain, and all these functions that you know, that you don't normally use. There's obviously something, you know, there's something to it.
Yeah. So what else? The shaking bed, the fixing watches.
So then, like, you know, of course, like little weird shit, but the kind of the next big thing growing up was when I was 15, I had an out-of-body experience, which was the fucking gnarliest thing that ever happened. One of the gnarliest things that ever happened to me. And the scariest shit that ever happened to me. And again, I didn't really believe in a lot of the stuff. You know, like I'm like the glass half empty dude.
Yeah.
I've always been like, prove it to me, you know, like, you know, it's one of those things where I won't call bullshit on it, but I want to be proven wrong to some degree on stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and I think going into a lot of stuff, that's kind of the way you have to be, is to be like, oh, well, you know, like, I don't know, is it real or is it not? So yeah, when I was about 15.
But that's important, because I feel like I'm kind of the same way. I don't discount anything. Like, I'm like open to anything, but I also go into it like half, like not doubting it, but like you got to have a healthy amount of skepticism, I think, right? Like,
of course you do.
Yeah, so,
like,
you know,
I mean, us human, I think human beings want tangible. Our goal is always to have tangible
or measurable.
Proof of,
yeah.
Physical, tangible proof of something.
Yeah.
And I think it's just the way we are.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, there's a lot of shit that happens, but tell me why it happens. You know, and that's one of the going back to that whole thing where it's like, you know, like we're all God's things. Like, you know, that thing is kind of the same thing. It's like, you know, your dog probably doesn't question everything. You know, I mean, you're not in the psyche of a dog, but a dog doesn't probably question, you know, why do I like treats? You know, why do I like to go for walks? You know, I mean, we can't know for sure, but for the most part, I think people always want to have proof of something. You know, and that's why I say, like, even being on the podcast, it's like I can't prove that this shit is real to anybody else, but to me, these are the experiences that I had, and to me, they were real experiences.
Yeah.
You know, do I say that? Do I say that it was real? I mean, I can't say it's real. I can't discredit it either. I know, you know, I mean, I only know what I know. So
yeah. And yeah, you only know your experience, right? Like what you've experienced. So go ahead. When you were 15, what happened?
So when I was
out of body
15,
experience.
yeah. So, which is really weird, dude, because this is like regardless of it, whether it's like unconscious or conscious, it's not dreaming.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's probably other people out there that have out of body experience. It's not dreaming. It's not a lucid dream. It's not anything like that. It is the weirdest, uncomfortable feeling that I've ever had. Like one of the most uncomfortable feelings I've ever had in my life, and scary as shit. So when I was a kid, when I was like 15, of course, I was like into hardcore and punk and all this shit, so of course, we're going back to like the 80s now. My bed was in one corner of my room, and next to my bed I had like house speakers. So I had my stereo, which was my turntable, my cassettes underneath, and then of course, like it was like one of those tall ones where you have like your albums go on the bottom of it, and then you have your tape deck and your tuner, and then your record player on the top,
yep.
Or your turntable on the top, and I had two speakers next to it. So my bed was lower than my speakers. Okay, this is I'm explaining you to this because you'll understand where I'm going with it. So my speakers, I would say, were probably maybe like 1.5 to 2 feet higher than where my head was on my bed. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm sleeping, and my alarm clock was on top of my speaker so that I could hit it when I was, like when I snoozed it and shit before school. So it was somewhere after 4 o'clock in the morning. I want to say it was like maybe 4:13, 4:10, something like that. And I remember not really waking up, but I remember like being like conscious, but not. And when I looked over, because I kind of like freaked out, because I was like, whoa, what's going on? And when I looked over, my clock on my speaker was at eye level. Right? So now, like, which is 2 feet higher than my bed.
Sure.
So I'm going like, dude, what in the world is going on? This is weird. Like, am I sitting up? Like,
Yeah.
And again, it was not a dream. It was because when it's happening, it's like there's multiple things that are happening, like physically, that you're feeling that wouldn't necessarily be a dream. So whether it's an altered state or whatever, out of body experience is, it's not like a dream, because we've all had like dreams or lucid dreams when, something's happening, or like, but this was not it. This was like other level shit, like different consciousness kind of thing. So as I'm looking at my clock, I'm watching it kind of like get lower and lower and lower until it's about like, I would say maybe like 3 feet under where I am. And then I went from looking at that, I went to looking straight down, and I saw me lying in bed, the back of my, like from my waist up, basically at that point, me laying like this, with like my arms underneath my pillow with my face down. My head was like tilted to the side. And I remember being like, what the fuck? This is weird. And as this is happening, I'm like floating and floating and floating until I got towards high enough where I could see my whole bedroom in depth. Like I could see like my hardcore posters that were hanging on because now I'm like freaking out trying to figure out what's going on. Like, at this point I'm like, dude, what is going, like, this is weird. Like, this is a weird dream. Like, I don't feel like I'm dreaming. I'm conscious of what's going on.
Yeah.
And everything was like in depth. You know, like when you dream sometimes, like you might be in your house, but everything's not exactly the same, or you might be in a room where it looks the same, but like details of it are not specific.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this room, like everything in the room is like, it is specific. Like I am like
in your room
looking, like I'm like on a ladder, sitting on a ladder, looking at my room.
Yeah. Yeah.
So me being like kind of the way I am, I wanted to make sure, like I'm looking around now. I'm pretty scared, dude, but I'm looking around to make sure that I see stuff that is like, that is in my room, you know, and my room's basically laid out. And at that point is when I freaked out. And then I was trying to wake, like, I remember trying to wake myself up and not being able to be like, now I'm, you know, I wouldn't say I was as high as the ceiling, but I'm starting to like float, you know, and float and float and float. And now I'm getting like freaked out because I can't wake up. And then I was like, man, I have to like do something about this. Something's fucked up. Like, and my first thought was like, that I wouldn't be able to get back. And I was like, dude, I'm going to float out of here. And then they're going to find me dead in the morning.
Yeah.
Like that was my first, you know, cause like you watched it at 15, you've watched enough shit, dude, and horror movies and all this weird shit to basically be like, I'm dying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like something's fucked up. Like I'm not gonna be able to get back into my body. And then as soon, like I just kind of felt myself like willing back into it. You know, like willing myself to be like, dude, I have to do this. I have to do this. And when that happened, I snapped back, dude, and I woke up like I woke up and I sat up. Like straight up. You know, sometimes like you stop breathe, or like, you know, like when you sleep and you can't like wake yourself back up and you freak out. Like, you know, sometimes you're like you do one of those things, you know. This wasn't that, dude. I woke up like, and I just sat up and I just remember being like, holy shit, dude. Like what just happened to me? And I didn't go back to sleep. And I remember the next day I went to school and I remember telling like the dudes that I hung out with that skated, like this shit happened. And they were like, whoa, dude, that's kind of crazy. And I was like, yeah, it wasn't a dream, you know? And so that was kind of that experience. It was really traumatizing, like for me. It was really like, I remember being like, dude, I don't want to go back to sleep.
Yeah. It was only that one time ever?
No, it happened multiple times.
Yeah.
It's happened multiple times.
Did you get used to it, or did you embrace it, or did you just like every time freak out and be like,
no,
get the fuck back in there?
It to me it was very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know, because I think like the difference between what was happening and that was, the difference is you're consciously thinking. In dreams, I feel like you don't consciously think. You know, like you see stuff that's happening, but you're not necessarily consciously thinking about the stuff that's happening. You know, you're basically it's happening, and you're just kind of along for the ride. You know, like when you dream, like you could think in a dream, you know, and kind of sometimes you could alter dreams, I feel. And this might be me. I don't know if this happens to you, or any other human being, but this is not on the same level. This is not necessarily being like kind of along for the ride. You're consciously aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the scary thing, because I think at some point you're thinking like that you're not going to be able, if this is happening and it's real, you're not going to be able, this is not going to be able to happen.
And how many, like, so did it feel like when people talk about like, did you ever research like astral projection and stuff, or did it feel like something different?
I definitely, I have done like some research. Like not a ton.
Yeah.
But this coming out is very. When I say coming out, I mean like at first it's very it seems very subtle, like kind of like a very soft, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like it's not like, like in movies when they like do that weird thing where it's just like, it's like, and it's like something just is like appears, you know what I mean? It's not like that. It's like this weird separation that happens, or to me, this separation that happened really slowly. Where you're kind of aware of what's going on, where I'm like I said, I was looking at the clock being like, why is this clock next to me? I know this thing is above my head. And then as it's like kind of like slowly going away from me, you're like, wait, this is really weird. And as that's happening, you're kind of feeling, to me, how I felt was kind of like that feeling when you drop on a roller coaster.
Yeah.
That first like initial like drop. That was kind of like what at that point, I remember it kind of feeling like, and it didn't happen fast, but it was kind of like that same feeling, whereas this weird inertia kind of happening that like, it didn't really make much sense in my brain, but it happened slow.
Yeah.
I would say it probably, and I remember the really weird thing is that now I was looking at a clock, right? So now the clock that's next to my bed is a digital clock. So as I'm watching this clock, because it's next to me, when I woke up, it was 4 minutes later than when I saw the clock when it was happening.
Yeah.
So, and people will probably be like, that's fucking bullshit. But really it was like, and as I'm like, as this is happening, whether it took 4 minutes or not, it's like, if it was a dream, dude, how would I know it's 4:10 or whatever, I'm pretty sure it was about 4:10. And then when I woke up, it was like 4:14 or something. So it's like, how could I consciously know if it was a dream, what time it was? And then when I woke back up, it's 4 minutes later than when I was dreaming. I mean, that's an awful, crazy coincidence if that was necessarily the truth.
Yeah.
So to some degree, that was kind of like me making sense of it in some weird way, where I was like, dude, how would I, like people would say, well, how do you know it happened? I'm like, well, I was kind of like looking at a clock the whole time that it was happening, and I knew that I wasn't gone for long. Like it didn't happen for a long period of time. The longer part of the whole thing was me trying to figure out how to wake up out of this, or to get back to not being floating on the ceiling type shit.
Did you feel like you were going to go through the ceiling, or like did it?
Yeah, for 100%.
Yeah, that's wild. Did the clock change while you were looking at it? Like, the
clock did.
Yeah.
So as this is happening, like I have like a gauge, it just so happened. I mean, I feel like I had a gauge to be like what's going on. Like I've seen, again, I wasn't focused on the clock. I'm focusing on all this stuff. I know where there's posters in my room. I know where there's a Sick of It All poster hanging in my room.
Yeah.
I know where there's, Gorilla Biscuits Start Today was next to my bed. I had a giant Start Today poster that was next to my bed. I know where it is.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not supposed to be 5 feet underneath me.
Yeah, yeah.
But again, the clock was kind of like this weird thing where I was like, well, that was weird. And I remember telling my buddies, like, dude, I was like, woke up and it was like almost the same time as when I was like left or was looking at my clock. So yeah.
Wild. Just an aside, Judge is playing Providence next Friday. Not tomorrow,
Really?
but next Friday. Yeah, if you, as we're talking about Sick of It All Gorilla Biscuit stuff, like if you're around, come on out. I know it's a little bit of a haul for you.
It is, but yeah.
So the other times, did it feel pretty much the same, or did it differ, or did you get more used to it at all, or like every time it was just like fuck this?
So.
And was it in the same time frame, or was it more?
No. I didn't have it for a long time, and it was, and I thought at first it was like, dude, was it turmoil that was happening in my life, and this kind of, these, it manifested in whatever way it was, but it always seemed to be random, dude, and it didn't happen again for a good amount of time, but it happened multiple times, and it felt the same, and it didn't happen a lot of times.
Yeah.
There was one time. There was 2 times. One of the times was different, but one time, I lived in my apartment. And I lived, up on a hill. And over on the other side of the hill was a park. That time I floated to the swing set at the park.
All right, so you were ways away, yeah.
Back. And then And it was like, it wasn't controllable, but I think at that point, that might have been the second time. I think at that point I was like, let me kind of see where this goes. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't like, I knew it had happened before, so I didn't completely freak out.
Yeah.
And I was like, let me, I was conscious enough to be like, hey, let me see, like, if I can kind of like do this shit.
Yeah. Sure, yeah.
To some degree.
Yeah.
This all sounds so fucking ridiculous, dude.
No.
But
I've heard of stuff like this before. I've never experienced it, but I've heard of stuff like it.
So it was scary, but I kind of was like, you know what? I was a little bit more intrigued by it, and I knew from the previous time I wasn't as scared.
Yeah.
So again, whatever was happening, whether I was really consciously leaving my body or I was on a different plane or a different frequency, and that was allowing me to do this, that was kind of at that point I was like, hey, like, let me kind of experience this without being like 100% scared.
Yeah.
That was obviously a little bit more time, and I didn't have anything really to gauge it by.
Yeah.
But then I was able to like to get myself back, and that wasn't like that was weird where I was somewhere else, but then it's not like I floated back.
Yeah.
I was able to like wake myself up. And again, I feel like when you're dreaming, it's not this. It's not really. It wasn't the same. Like, it wasn't the same feeling.
Yeah.
And again, whether I was in an altered state of consciousness, maybe where it was allowing me to kind of do other stuff and feel other things. It wasn't a dream.
Did it feel more like you were there, like your conscious was there present, like you were like floating there, like kind of like when I say like astral trajectory, or did it feel like you were remote viewing?
No, it felt like I was there. Like it felt like things are happening. Like I didn't necessarily like feel like like wind or breeze or anything like that, but I could see stuff happening. Like you could, like I could see trees like moving, and like it was like things are happening, but your physical perception of stuff was taken out of the equation.
Yeah.
Like where if you walk outside and it's windy out, you could feel the breeze.
You can feel how the temperature, stuff like that.
Like I was watching it's almost like you're there physically, but you're not physically feeling things.
Sure.
And that's kind of the experience that I had.
Any of the times that you kind of had out of body experiences, did you ever see anything that wasn't there in like regular existence?
So
like, did you ever see like other things that were like on that same frequency that you wouldn't see in regular life, if you know what I mean?
Not that the last time that this happened, that this happened was probably the scariest and the last time it happened. So this time was really strange. This is probably 15 years ago, I want to say 16 years ago. I was at a different apartment, which was down the street from my other apartment. This time, this is crazy. This time, when I left, out of the side of the wall. But the wall was had this like glowing blue light that was there, like a big blue kind of bright light, and I left out of that light. And for a short period of time, I remember seeing like the backyard, my cars, and then it was nothing. Like I was not like in my bed. I was not feeling anything. I was not anywhere like I used to be. And then a short period of time after, I was back in the back of my yard, and that blue light was on the outside of my house. And then I remember like floating through the blue light. And then that's when that process of like kind of like me sitting up, because I would get kind of freaked out. And I remember like waking up and being like super calm, but like freaked out, like physically. It wasn't like I woke up and like my heart was racing, or, like sometimes when you have bad dreams or something, like you'll wake up and like, your heart's racing or you're sweating or something like that. It was like, dude, I was like perfectly like calm. So that was the last time that happened. And I can't explain really what that like light was, but that freaked me out. And then, and again, like I wasn't in control at all of like what kind of was happening at that point.
So you didn't feel like you were actually navigating. You were just going somewhere.
That was the last. Yeah. And that was like, not that felt like not me. It felt like I was almost being pulled out kind of at that point. And that was the last time it happened. That was probably like, I would say probably 16 years ago.
Wow.
And that was fun. And that really freaked me out, because I feel like the other times I was in semi control of like what was going on. I was kind of conscious. This time I was not conscious of what was going on. It was like I floated out and then it was black. Like again, and being that stuff has happened, you're never used to it, but like you could see stuff where you're like, okay, like I know where I'm at. This was not like that. So where I was, I have no idea. I was not present, and then I was back. And then again, this like blue light opened up, and then I like floated into back into the room. And I was, at that point, I could see what was going on. Like, even when I like floated through the wall, which was really weird, I was able to, and the previous time before that, it was kind of the same. There was no blue light or anything, but the previous time like that, I was able to see, like, like leave kind of the premises of where I was, and I could see my house. And I remember floating like that. The second time, when I was telling you, I remember being like really high up, and I don't really like heights. So I was like, what, kind of like, what is going on? This is really weird. But the last time was, that was really freaked me out. I didn't sleep for like a couple days. I didn't get much sleep because I was afraid that shit was going to happen again. And again, it wasn't like a thing where I was, like I would I always felt like I didn't tell myself like, dude, I'm going to do this shit tonight. Like, I wasn't in control of it. It was just kind of, I feel like it kind of just happened.
Do you feel, was that blue light, did that feel like going through like a portal or something?
Dude, I don't know, but it felt, it was the strangest fucking thing. It almost felt like, if I remember correctly, it almost felt like electricity. Like, have you ever got shocked before by like, you ever get shocked by like 120, like your house plug or something?
Yeah. I was the idiot kid that had to test the theory, put something in it.
Of sticking like a fork in the.
It wasn't a fork, but it was like my Swiss Army knife or something. I was like,
oh yeah, like sticking it in there. Yeah. It felt kind of the same way. Like this, it was like this, like kind of like electric shock kind of feeling. And I remember in that time, I was not able to. I was kind of like not able to navigate. I guess, if you want to call it navigate or whatever, but I wasn't able to do anything. I was like, I remember just being like kind of like limp, like floating.
Yeah.
Almost. So I don't know. I mean, I can't say that, I don't know what it was. So I don't know, but I do remember this. And I remember the light just being this like super bright blue neon light that was just like, and it lit up my whole room.
It's wild, man.
Cause like at the time I was with my ex-girlfriend. So I was able to see her, and it just lit up the whole room. Like and again, like, every time that it happened, I was able to see stuff that in a dream you normally wouldn't be able to see. But yeah, it was like this weird electrical kind of charge, almost like when I went through it. And that sounded, again, all this stuff kind of sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, but then when you went through it, it was just like blackness, or you were just somewhere where you didn't know where you were.
So when I first went through, I was in my backyard.
Yeah.
So I was able to see the parking lot that was like behind my apartment.
Yep.
With all the car, there was like 4 or 5 cars that were parked back there with my neighbors. I was able to see those cars. And then it was just like black. It was like blacked out kind of thing. And then when I was back, I was still floating limp, but I was like floating through this like light back in, and as soon as I got back in, like, again, the room was blue, and that was kind of the same thing where you just kind of like, it always seemed like when I left, it was like this very easy feeling of, you know what I mean? Like just this separation where you're just like, kind of like floating in water almost, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of sense where you're just like, but then like getting back, it was always like this, like a kind of like a charge of, I want to say energy, but it was like this, like it's like kind of like this, you're like, and you're like back in, you're like, whoa, dude, like what happened? And I would always sit up on the side of the bed and just sit there and be like, dude, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
It was very unexplained, and never was it it a transition to waking up. It was like waking up, and it was like it was like immediate. You know, like when you wake up and you're like groggy from waking up. You know,
Yeah.
even sometimes if you have a bad dream and you wake up, you know, you're like kind of like out of it. There was no sense of being like out of it. It was essentially like, whoa, you know, almost like breathing like straight oxygen, you know, or something like that.
It's wild, man. Yeah, that's wild, dude. Like I'm jealous that I haven't had that, but I'm also glad that I haven't had that. You know what I mean?
Dude, and the other thing too is that it always kind of seemed to take a lot out of me when I woke up. Like I wasn't like exhausted, but I just like maybe mentally. You know, they say like you use a lot of energy. Like your brain uses like, I think they say in a day your brain uses 20% of the energy in your body. No other part of your body uses that much energy.
Yeah.
In a day. So you know, regardless of maybe whatever was happening to me was in my mind, and that's kind of why I would be like, I wouldn't be tired, but I would just be like drained.
Sure.
You know, like
did that last all day? Did that last through the day? That drained?
It usually lasted most of the day, where I was just like drained from it. You know, like and it was this, and it was a weird thing where it was always like, I feel like it always just kind of was like just this weird feeling that was like I didn't normally have this weird, you know, this weird feeling kind of, you know. And again, I mean, I can't necessarily say, you know, what it was. I know the last time that happened was probably the scariest time that happened, because again, regardless of what happened, whether it was I was abducted by something or you know, I was on a different frequency where I was not in control of what happened, and that was the last time it happened. So that was kind of the major thing that happened throughout, you know, my life. It wasn't like a constant thing that happened, but it was a constant, meaning like it didn't happen all the time, but it was this constant thing that happened multiple times.
Yeah. How long in between? Like, was it like years in between?
It was usually years in between.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I mean, it happened when I was 15. I would say 15, 16, somewhere right around there. And then it happened, I would say, when I was probably about somewhere around 25. And then the last time was, you know, probably like 15 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. So it didn't happen often.
Yeah.
But it was always the same thing, and it was uncontrollable. You know, which is another thing that kind of like, you know, like in theory makes sense, because it's like if something happens once, it's like an anomaly. It's just like it happened. Like, did it you know, it's like, what happened? Well, I don't know. But then when it happens again and you're not in control of it, then you're like, wait a minute, this happened again. And then when it happens, you know, another time, you're just like, man, you know, like, and it's always the same feeling, the same things that's kind of happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I ain't trying to scare you, but you're about due for another one, buddy.
Dude, I hope.
I'm just fucking with you.
I hope not. I mean, you know, again, it's kind of a neat thing.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, but it's just really scary, you know. I mean,
especially like the last one you said, where you weren't really in control of it as much as some of the other times.
Yeah, I wasn't in control of it at all, and I've never had, you know, like the other times, it's been this like smooth kind of transition, I guess. You know, this time it was like this really abrupt, weird thing with like, and again, I've never seen like lights or any, you know, anything like that.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, again, it sounds completely made up, but whatever happened to me, definitely consciously happened to me.
Yeah.
Whether anybody else could see it, probably not. And that's why I was saying, like these weird frequencies where it's, you might just be on a different frequency and that, and that's what happened. So.
Your dog in the room or something?
Yeah, my dog. She's sorry about that. She's like coughing. She's like an old girl. Yeah. So, and I mean, and I've had some other experiences, like with like entities and some stuff like that. So I think to some degree, I mean, we can get into that. That was pretty scary. Yeah. To some degree, I think people are just, that, like they say, like people that get struck by lightning, most people that have gotten struck by lightning, like will get struck by lightning multiple times.
Yeah.
They don't know why, but they're just like a lightning rod. There's something energy in them that attracts lightning. Like if you got struck by lightning once, you're probably prone to getting struck by lightning again. And to some degree, I think like supernatural stuff or this stuff is probably about the same. It's probably like you operate at a different kind of in a different realm to some degree than the average person maybe does, or you're utilizing a part of your brain that somebody else isn't utilizing. Yeah. So I think when stuff like that happens, you're more like a beacon, I guess, kind of for it.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, when I was a kid, we used to go to my grandparents' house, and I would always hear in the attic this is probably around 8, 9 years old. I would always hear somebody call my name. Like there was rooms upstairs in my grandparents' house, but there was like a TV in the living room and a shelf that blocked it. Oddly enough, that shelf is now in my shop because my grandmother made it, but it was like this heavy shelf with a television. And I would always hear somebody call my name upstairs, and I would never go upstairs because we weren't really allowed to go upstairs, and nobody was upstairs. Occasionally we'd go.
When you say upstairs, is it attic or a second floor of the house?
It was a second floor of the house. It was partially an attic, and then there was a bedroom upstairs.
Okay.
And a lot of the times when we went over there, and I wasn't the only one that heard it, because I would hang out with my cousin Zach, who was like also motorcycle dude. His dad was like getting back to the motorcycle thing. His dad was a custom bike builder and painter, and painted most of the club guys' stuff. I think in the last podcast I briefly touched on that, but he heard it. He's heard it. He heard it as well, because we were there, and I was like, dude, did you just hear that? And he was like, yeah. It was like somebody said your name, and I was like, yeah, dude.
So that's wild. It didn't say his name. It said he heard it say your name.
Yeah. He heard it say my name. So it was, some stuff like paranormal stuff like that has happened. Probably like the biggest paranormal thing that ever happened to me was, and I was hoping to talk about this, was a friend of mine had a shop, and he was a bike guy too, and his shop was obviously we live in New England, and New England has old factory buildings, obviously, and we all know somebody that has had a shop in a factory, probably,
Yeah.
And they were always like old manufacturing buildings, whether, whatever they manufactured, brass or whatever. And he lived, his shop and his apartment were in this building, which was the Sessions building. And the Sessions Sessions was a clock company that I believe started in like the 1800s. And, here in New England, obviously, a lot of the old buildings were run on water, so they're always really close to like rivers or something like that because of factories. And his shop was on the second floor of the building, and I would go and he would do machine work for me, or I would use his lathes and whatnot, and we would build bikes in his shop, and so I was there a lot. And I remember being there one day and him and hearing like metal wheeled carts upstairs, right? And being like, dude, who's upstairs? Third floor, I had nothing in there. He's like, go upstairs, dude. So we go upstairs. He's like, come on, let's go upstairs. We go upstairs. There's nothing up there. Go back downstairs. You'd hear carts. So I was pretty intrigued with just the building, and you'd always kind of see like shadows, you know what I mean? Like out of the side of your eye,
Yep.
corner of your eye, you just kind of notice something or whatever the case may be. And so we did some research. We found out that the building had a fire and that there was a bunch of people that died in the fire. And then, Ritter, my buddy Ritter, he would talk to the ghosts all the time because he was there all the time, and he'd be like, hey dude, what's up? Like blah, 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 and I'd be like, dude, that's so weird that you talk to and he's like, one of these days, dude, he's like, so he went away on vacation down to Florida with his dad, and he had a bunch of plants in his shop. He was like into plants. So he's like, dude, can you come over to the shop and like water my plants for like the next 2 weeks? So I was like, yeah, no problem. So I went over to the house to water the plants, and he had a doorway that he cut from where his shop was into where his like living space was. And because there was a wall between the two, so he cut like a doorway in the wall, and there was a hallway because the kitchen was on the other side of it. There was like in between like the windows and kind of this wall, and the water was obviously on the other side. So I got there, I watered a couple plants, I ran out of water, and I turned and I walked through this doorway, and right when I walked through, there was like this shape of a human being, dude, but it was like fuzz on a television, dude. And when I walked through this thing, and it was like super cold, and it was like I got immediate anxiety, like just like anxiety filled. It was the weirdest, strangest feeling. I almost like kind of like felt weak in the knees almost to some degree while I was passing through this thing. And I was like, that was fucked, because it was in one motion. I turned to walk, and as I was walking, I couldn't, I was already right in there. Motion.
Yeah.
And I immediately called him, and I was like, dude, I don't know what the fuck just happened, but something crazy just happened. And he was like, you saw the ghost? And I was like, I don't know what happened. And he was like, it was like static on a television that like it was in the shape of a human being, right? And I was like, he described it, perfectly. And I was like, yeah, I walked through it. And he was like, oh shit, dude. He's like, I've never walked through it, but I see it all the time, and it doesn't really freak me out. Like that's why that's the dude that I talk to. So again, it was just, like this concreted like reinforcement of me not because I didn't explain it to him at all.
Yeah.
He told me what I had seen. I didn't say a word to him. I said, I think I just walked through the ghost, I said to him. and he was like, oh yeah, blah, like gives me this description, and then the description matches this entity of this thing that I walked through, and again, it was the weirdest thing. I like it was like I felt like flushed almost.
Did it like dissipate or disappear when you walked through it, or did it hang around?
I was.
Or did you not hang around?
I did not hang around, dude. I got fucking really scared, and I just like walked into the other room, and then I just literally left.
Yeah.
Just because like I was like, what the fuck just happened to me?
Sure. Yeah.
But that building, we would see there was a lot of paranormal stuff that happened in that building, and a few other times, we did some like scouting in the building down in the basement that had been locked for, I mean. When the building caught on fire, the part that caught on fire, dude, it was a brick building. They just knocked all the bricks into the basement, and then they filled the building back up.
Yeah.
And and we would kind of go down and explore. And there was one room in this building, dude, that the whole floor of the it was a bathroom. The whole floor of the bathroom was full of pigeon bones. And the pigeons would fly into this room, and then they would never be able to leave. There was like a broken window, and they would fly in, and they were just dead. And there was like, like 6 inches of pigeon bones inside this, this room.
Yeah.
I don't know what attracted them to that room, but they never would leave. And like in the basement, we would go down and explore in the basement, and there was a room in the basement that you would get this really weird feeling in this room. And it was kind of like a really, really old office. And there was a Foot Locker, and inside the Foot Locker was somebody's street clothes, like a pair of dress shoes and like a dress shirt and pants. Like they went to work and then they just never left. And as soon as you would walk through this doorway, the basement would be super like damp and humid, and you would walk into this one room, dude, and it was always like really cold and like really like sterile kind of feeling. And and we'd always say, oh dude, that dude like went to work and never went home.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's always weird stuff again that kind of happened to me over the years. I mean, I think the weirdest was kind of the out of body experience, but with the ghost stuff, everybody that was in the building was all friends of ours that was in the building, and they would always say like, like weird things, would happen, or you would hear like all kinds of weird stuff that happened as far as like people walking that were in places that had nobody in there. They were locked with, behind doors that nobody would be there, or people yelling and there's nobody in the building. It would be like me and him in the whole building and nobody else there except for our buddy Jay that we grew up with. And there would be people like yelling and screaming, but there was nobody there because like you needed a key to get into the place, and only people that had spaces had keys.
Yeah, it's wild. I wonder, a lot of these old mill buildings or these old factories in New England, when we were kids, they were still there, and now there doesn't seem to be as many of them around in that state. Now they're either knocked down and stuff rebuilt on that land, or they're converted into like condos or apartments or something. So I just wonder, it's like, in these places that are now apartments and stuff, I wonder if that weird shit's still happening, right?
I mean, you would imagine this is still just a factory building with like workspaces in it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll ever be
something
but
else,
yeah, you have to want, I mean, it makes complete sense. It's like, dude, if these people like never went home, they're still there. They, they necessarily maybe can't get to where they need to get. They're just stuck in this, vibration or this this plane where they can never get out of it.
Yeah, it's wild.
Or leave. So, I mean, that's a lot of the, and there's always been weird stuff that's happened to me, and I just kind of discredit it, where it's just like, little stuff like, oh, that was weird, or that's weird. Not anything that you would really like be able to point your finger at or even remember. But there's it's always there. I feel like I've been lucky enough to have a lot of experiences with kind of this stuff where people don't. And again, like I've always like taken it with a grain of salt to be like, did that shit really happen?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, people are going to listen to this podcast and be like, that dude's fucking crazy.
No. Because it's, I've had a lot of people on talk about different experiences and some are similar, you know what I mean? And I think it's interesting because the more people I talk to and you hear about their experiences, there's a lot of overlap and, through, so it makes you just wonder, like, I know we're talking about a lot of different things here, but like, what is out there? Like, and just, in multiple ways, like, you know what I mean? Like whether it's like, like you said, you had out of body experiences or experienced things with like a ghost or an entity or just, things like that. Like what is going on out there? You know what I mean? Like it's wild because when you hear the same thing and these people that don't know each other and from different parts of the country or the different parts of the world, are saying very similar things. It's hard to discount,
Yeah. And I mean, is it something that like is inbred in us for thousands of years? I mean, I've done like a lot of research on like, I've always been intrigued by like ancient civilizations and stuff like that, like
Sure.
kind of on my own, just like, and like Sumerians and, there's all these like weird texts, that, like the Book of Enoch and stuff like that, where you're just like, like
the Emerald Tablets of Thoth.
It's like, dude,
I can't ever say that name. Thoth, whatever.
I'm not saying like these. I'm not saying like these people are, like not smart enough back then to be able to make something up. But it's like, a lot of the stuff. It's like even with the stuff that with me, it's like, why would I like why? I'm not like
especially back then because it's not like now, right? Like this is. I just want to compound on your point.
Yeah.
Like you had to go through a lot of fucking work back then to document something. So why would you document some bullshit, right? Like whereas now you could just type an email or write a little letter or write a little note or whatever. But like these guys had to like you had to spend days or weeks or months like inscribing something, you know what I mean? Like, so you're not going to do it lightly, I don't think. Or I would assume you're not going to do it lightly,
No, and people,
unless it was just some jackasses that were like, "Hey, some dudes are going to find this 10,000 years from now or 5,000 years from now and make a religion out of it." Yeah,
and I agree with you 100%. Why would they do it if, for example? Yes, I understand there's fables, but like to me, I feel like a lot of this stuff begins as a true story.
Yeah.
And then, it gets blown out of proportion or taken out of context because it's like, like as it travels down the line, people get the story mixed up.
Or they add a little bit to it, make it more interesting or whatever. Or there's an agenda to make it go a certain way or all the human shit of embellishment for whatever reason.
But like the Book of Enoch, I mean, like that, for example, is, you're talking about a civilization that's like 12,000 years old, right? And it's like this dude goes into depth about these angels that came and took them and what they taught him and what their particular roles were as far as teaching him language and mathematics and all these different things like how to farm and all this different stuff. And it's like, why?
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't the dude just be like, yeah, this is, like, I learned this from my dad. or whatever the case may be. Like, why would you go into like some crazy embellishment of like why this, why this would be?
Yeah.
It, to me, it doesn't really make much sense as to why.
Sure. And it's like, and to go even further back with the Sumerians and the cuneiform tablets talking about Anunnaki and whatnot, and the same type of things, like where these things came down and showed us this or did this or were involved in these wars. Like people weren't writing the theme of Star Wars on like, a movie script, like, in ancient Sumeria, right? Like they were documenting things that were important enough to document, to go through all that trouble of documenting it.
Yeah.
Only a certain amount of people wrote, for one.
Right.
And then two,
on stone tablets that they knew would be like, oh, dude, well, if we write this in the sand, dude, it's going to get blown away.
Yeah.
Like you write it, or clay tablets that were like, that they knew would last for long periods of time. Just taking everything away from that, with the Anunnaki and all that stuff, taking everything away from it, okay? Why in the world for 10,000 years have we been, as human beings, been so enamored by gold?
Yeah.
Like, this is what I think of. Why? You can't eat gold, so ancient people couldn't eat it. They can't make tools out of it. It's a soft metal that doesn't do anything. Yeah, it conducts electricity, but you're talking at a time, maybe there was electric batteries, maybe there wasn't, but you could also use, brass or copper for that as well. So why are we so fixated on gold?
Yeah.
If you take strip everything away from this, and you just say Anunnaki came here for gold, they made human beings to work for them, semi-intelligent beings to work for them, right? To mine this ore, this gold. What? Like, why? Why do Aztecs give a fuck about gold, dude? Gold didn't do anything for them.
No. Do you have any physical gold like coins or anything?
I do. Yeah, I have physical.
It's wild, right? Like when you hold it, like I'm not one for like gold jewelry or anything, but like I have a few like gold coins and silver and stuff, and it's like you just want to touch it. I gotta keep it in the bags and stuff because I don't want to get like candle oil or anything.
Like enamored by it.
But you need to touch it and feel it, and you're like it's like a very gold fever is real. Anyone that has gold can attest to that, whether it's on your neck or like in your hand as a coin, but especially when it's like a coin. I don't know why. Like when it's like a it's coin or a bullion or something, it's very bizarre.
It's like a physical, or even like even if you have like a nugget of gold, or like, and it's like you feel the weight of it and you have this thing, but in all reality, what the fuck, like gold doesn't do shit until recent years of them using it in technology. It doesn't really do anything for it. It didn't do anything. Yeah, it was a currency and whatnot, but in reality,
a decorative, type of thing for
Yeah, but why do we hold it in such high regards?
Yeah.
Why does somebody that have gold is a king compared to a petty person? Like, where does that come from? Because silver is awesome and platinum is awesome, and all these other metals that are precious metals. Why gold? Why is gold still more expensive than platinum and silver? Like what? Like the only reason why gold is more expensive is because people want gold.
Yeah.
So, I've always thought about that, where it's like, why do we have this? Why are we fixated on gold? And it makes sense that if we were programmed at some time to mine gold for another civilization or another race, that we would be enamored by it because that's what they programmed us to do.
Yeah.
They're like, dude, you have to dig this stuff because this stuff is important. You're like, oh, this is important. I have to do it.
Okay. Yeah. This is good. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's wild, man. I wish, like, if you had a time machine, like, where would you go? Like, you know what I mean? Would you go to the future? Would you go to the past? Like, where? Like,
I would go to the past. I don't. you know.
Yeah.
I like, because I would want to understand all this stuff that's not explained. Definitely. I would want to go back to like Sumerian. I would want to go back to, you know, Egypt, that whole, you know, that whole part of the world, you know.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's obviously where, like, you know, civilization started.
Sure.
You know, I mean, everything kind of goes back to that, but, you know, also like kind of connect the dots of where, you know, where it's, you know, being like, there's many cultures that have done the same thing. Why did they do it? You know, I fully believe that ancients traveled more than we think they did.
Yeah.
You know, like back then, and like, you know,
people didn't spontaneously stop making pyramids all over the world. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Like Mexico was very far from you know, from Egypt and
right,
you know, Indonesia or wherever, you know.
And why are you going to do it?
Yeah.
Why would you do it? Like, what is the significance of a pyramid? Buildings aren't built in pyramids now. Yeah. So it's not like it's the structure of it. You know, there's other structures that were built. So why a pyramid?
Yeah.
You know, is it energy? Is it, you know, I mean, is it some way to communicate? Is it communication? Whatever the case may be.
Yeah. It's wild.
You know, and I think a lot of this stuff is older than what, you know, people and scientists think. And the reason I think it is they you know, they don't want to discredit what, you know, what they think. Yeah. You know, what scientists have thought and taught all this stuff, and they go, oh, well, we can't be wrong.
Yeah, you know, they don't want to have to rewrite it. Yeah, which is weird because that's the whole thing of science, is like you make scientific discoveries and you adjust what you know and then you go from there. But yeah, there's a lot with that. Did you? I don't know if you it was pulled from YouTube right away, so it's not on there. But if you hear the last episode, if not, I can send it to you, with this guy Todd Cave. We got into a lot of this stuff, so I think you'd be into that one. Yeah, like he went in. Like I probably said 10 words the whole episode, man. He was just going like, and he goes.
Yeah, I didn't. You'll have to definitely.
I'll send it to you. He goes in hard on that stuff, but
I mean, I think a lot of that. I think a lot of it is real. You know, I mean, I don't think we're necessarily alone. Again, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, like
what's your feelings on this disclosure stuff going on, or like the disclosure, like because you know, when you say we're not alone, bringing up the alien stuff, like do you feel like this disclosure stuff is real, or do you feel it's like a psyop?
No, I mean, I believe to some degree. I mean, I believe that a lot of it is real, because again, I don't think that, you know, to say that we're alone is awfully selfish of human beings.
Sure.
You know,
yeah, I mean, arrogant. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very arrogant, and it's super selfish to think that that's the case. You know, so I feel like, I feel a lot of it is unexplainable, and I think people in power don't like to not have control and not be able to explain stuff.
Yeah.
You know, regardless of what you know the truth of the matter is. You know, it's like and even going back to the Sumerian thing, where you see some of these texts, and it's like, you know, I don't mean to keep going back to that, but it's like they, you know, I watched something where they were saying that these scientists took like this map of the universe the map of our solar system, right?
Yeah.
And they had a map of the solar system. Now all the planets, they go into depth to what the planets look like.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. I've seen that.
Features of the planet.
Yeah.
So then they look at it, they say there's obviously 10 planets, you know, Scientists have recently found that they think that there's another planet because Uranus is it Uranus or Pluto? One of the two is like super gas. They thought it was all ice, but it's gas. So they're saying that there has to be another planet that circles around that to keep that in orbit.
Yeah.
So, but these scientists took the map that they had, and they like knowing time, and like on the computer and being able to like manipulate time, they took and programmed this map into it, and then they rewound it to 10 or 12,000 years of like Sumerians, and the planets are all in the order that they were in 10,000 years ago.
Yeah.
But telescopes are what, 1,000 years old, maybe 1,200 years old. So it's like, how do you explain dude, there's no possible way that some dude just said, I'm going to make a map of what I think is fucking real.
Yeah. No, like, there's so much weird stuff, man. And then even if you get into like, this is like a step removed from what you're talking about. Like you see all these like old, not hieroglyphs, but like old, carvings and stuff. And they have all these entities, and they all have a watch on, and they're holding a bag, and it's all the same one. And it's like, what is going on? What was all that? You know what I mean? Like there's a lot. There's a lot of weird stuff that is like cross cultures, like that in time frames that is out there.
And people always, and people or scientists will say, well, that's a interpretation of blah 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 blah. But like when you think about these people, if they saw something, like Aztecs, right? Their art was Aztec art. Okay, like let's bring it into modern day, right? Yeah. Graffiti is all different, but graffiti is the same, right? Graffiti is dudes spray painting on a wall, or women, people spray painting on a wall. It's letters of their name. Okay, it might differ somewhat, but it is the same thing. So it's like Aztecs are going to do artwork that is Aztec art. They're not going to make something that looks like something like, we'll say, a rocket ship, because they can only interpret their artwork what is as their artwork.
Yeah, what they're seeing in life. Yeah.
Yeah, so like their interpretation through art is whatever you see. Yeah. Just like the Native Americans, like painting in like the caves and stuff. You can kind of tell what the stuff is, but like it's their interpretation of it.
Sure.
So it's like, how do you explain a lot of this stuff? How do you explain some dude sitting in some chamber, and then he's got like this thing that looks like oxygen, coming like into his nose, that
astronaut helmet and this and that.
Yeah.
The rocket, the controls. And there's a rocket. They're showing the exhaust and stuff, like.
But no other art that they have, like, models the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the art style is the same, but not. It's not like you see it in every single thing where you see animals. Like animals are always like a constant thing, obviously, in ancient times. You always see animals. It's like even in Egyptian stuff, it's always the same gods, the same thing. But then you have this one thing that's just this weird thing, and they're like, no, dude, that's not that.
Yeah.
We interpreted it as this, and you're like, but there's nothing else that remotely looks like that.
Yeah.
In their artwork, although the style is the same, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And it's like, so to even bring it forward on a kind of different note, but still, there's so many paintings from like Renaissance area or like, medieval times that have like UFOs in the painting. Like, what the fuck was that? Like, you know what I mean? Like wild.
Yeah, exactly.
Like not even like blatant, like flying saucer looking motherfuckers. Like, you know what I mean? Right. It's like crazy.
Right. They don't even know. It's like, why would they be in the picture?
Yeah.
There's nothing that floated in the air back then. It's not like there was like Zeppelins. And they were like, oh, a Zeppelin was flying by. They're just like,
and if they painted a Zeppelin, you would see it as a Zeppelin. You would know, what I mean?
And these paintings are like paintings that are legitimate things that are like it's not like a loose interpretation.
Yeah.
I mean, I get some of them have gods and stuff like that, but
Sure,
a lot of like the Renaissance.
I'm just talking about when it's like a painting of a woman and then you just see a flying saucer in the corner.
Yeah. It's like this like Victorian like woman.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden in the sky, there's like a something floating in the sky. You're like, oh, dude, that's not a coincidence.
Yeah. That's wild.
That lady has nothing to do with, that interpretation is like an interpretation of what the artist saw probably at that time.
And it was striking enough to document it forever in the painting, like.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I believe in a lot of that stuff. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theory kind of dude. I'm more or less like, logical about stuff.
Yeah.
But again, like with I think they never released this stuff because, of all the hype, and people would get fucking, crazy and lose their minds. Like, like War of the Worlds type shit.
Yeah. No, it's wild. Here's a question I have for you, because I think it would be a good one for you to throw at you. I'm interested to hear what you would say, because it's kind of like the time travel question. If you could get into the Vatican archives and they said, all right, you can look up and find the answer to one thing,
what would that one thing be?
Yeah, what would be the main thing you'd be like, all right, let me go, because they got all kinds of shit there.
Probably the one thing that I think I would look up would be, oh man, that's a tough question.
Yeah.
I think
it doesn't have to be the final answer, but what would be one of the
things? The one thing I think that I would look up would probably be the history of speech. Would be which seems boring, or language, but it would be the history of language, because there's no history of language. And how did human beings learn to? They say we went from grunts to being able to communicate with one another. It's not possible. Yeah. Like it's so. When you look at, it's as easy as this. When you look at Asian languages in writing, scientists say there's no direct link to Latin or to any other languages. Yeah. It's a language that's separate from there's not one letter, there's not one sound that can cross over to it being a link between the two. Yeah. So where did it come from?
Yeah.
And it had to have been taught.
Yeah, and then it's like, and if that's that one, where did these other ones, did language just spontaneously occur on different continents at different times and evolve, Yeah,
it's not possible. Like to me. So that being said leads into where did it come from?
Yeah.
Like in the bigger picture. So I think if I was to ask that question, then that question would lead to what was the extraterrestrials that brought the language?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it would kind of be like a two-part question.
Yeah. To
be like, oh, dude, by me asking this question, I know what I'm going to find out. Instead of being like, hey, is there aliens? Is there extraterrestrials?
Yeah.
It would be like a kind of a answer, two-part answer to
you found a way to get a 2-for-1.
Yeah.
You got a 2-for out of it. Yeah. Oh, fuck yeah, man. Cool. I mean, here's the thing. We could talk about this stuff all night.
I know we could talk about this all night. And like the last time. Yeah. I mean, I think I disclosed enough of my personal shit that people are I'm gonna be hearing about this for probably the next 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But again, it's all stuff that I can't prove. And again, I mean, if anything, I'm obviously not the only one. Like you said, there's a lot of links between what people that I've talked to kind of and have not, you know, a lot of people say like, you know, you can you know, you're able to contact, you know, through meditation and long meditation, you're able to contact, you know, different frequencies and other beings through that. And I haven't explored that yet. I just can't get myself to do much meditating, but in the future I would, you know, I'd like to. But again, I also I can't say that it did or it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna like, you know, I'm not gonna say any of this stuff is real. It's a perception and an experience that I had. I mean, if this helps somebody else with an experience, then I'm glad to have done it, you know.
And no matter what, I always go back to life is more interesting when you look at weird stuff like that's happened to people, right? There's more out there, and you don't want to lose it in the mundane day to day. You know, obviously we're a couple of days after the election. That's all people have been talking about all week.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, all right, cool. Like, all right, it's over. Like, you know what I mean? There's other shit going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there is other stuff, and there's deeper stuff. I think, you know, again, I think people just rely on the face value of things and don't really, you know, put a lot of stuff out of their mind. I mean, I'm glad that I could come on the podcast and you know, talk about these experiences, regardless of whether, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But,
and it's just the world's more interesting than what you see on CNN or Fox or MSNBC or, you know, or CBS or ABC.
There's a whole universe out there, dude. And when I'll say this on this is my final note is what I'm going to say is this. Always remember, dude, that the universe does not give a fuck about you. Yep. There's all kinds of stuff happening that you need to be in tune with, and don't think that anything that the universe is happening. The universe is huge. We're minuscule in this big thing that's happening, that even when you zoom out from the country, from the earth, like, yeah, we're happening and we're here, but like, you gotta keep in mind, like, to have an open mind to anything that's going on, just because we're floating on a rock through darkness, dude.
Yeah. Oh shit. And on that note, I think he I don't know what just happened there, but so, you know, keep it locked. Stay weird. All right. Yeah, we lost him, but shout out to Harley for coming on. And if you have some experiences that are weird, paranormal stuff, and you want to share it on the show, always reach out, bigtruthpodcast@gmail.com, or DM me on Instagram or any of that stuff, Big Truth. And we will get you going. And this is Harley calling me, so I'm going to log out right here.